My father died on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, my brother had already changed the locks on the lake house. I didn't find out right away. I was still at the hospital in Cincinnati, sitting with my mother in that small bereavement room they have on the fourth floor, the one with the fake ficus in the corner and the box of Kleenex that's always half empty. My mother kept folding and unfolding the same paper napkin in her lap. I kept staring at the window. Neither of us said much. There wasn't much to say. My father had been sick for 14 months, and even though you tell yourself you're prepared, you never actually prepared. His name was Richard. He was 67 years old. He coached Little League for 11 years, made the best smoked brisket I've ever tasted, and cried at every single one of my school plays, even when I had no more than 4 lines. He was not a perfect man, but he was a good one. And he loved us, my mother, my brother, and me, in that steady, quiet way that you only really understand after it's gone. I'm the younger of 2. My brother, Todd, is 5 years older than me. Growing up, we were close enough. Shared holidays, inside jokes about our parents, the usual sibling stuff. But somewhere in our 20s, things shifted. Todd got married to a woman named Patrice, and Patrice had very specific ideas about family hierarchy, about who deserved what, about the fact that Todd, as the firstborn son, should naturally inherit more. She never said it outright to my face, but she didn't have to. My father had worked his whole life. He'd spent 30 years as a structural engineer, saved carefully, invested wisely. He and my mother owned a home in suburban Cincinnati worth around $480,000, a lake house in northern Michigan that had been in his family since the 70s, and a brokerage account that, as of his last statement, held just over $1.1 million. Not generational wealth by any dramatic standard, but for our family, it was everything he built, everything he'd spent a lifetime protecting. He had a will. He'd updated it 18 months before he died, with a lawyer he'd used for 20 years. It was simple and clear, everything split equally between my mother, Todd, and me. The lake house was to be held jointly, to be sold only with unanimous agreement, proceeds split 3 ways. My mother got the primary residence for as long as she lived, after which it would also be split equally. I knew all of this because my father told me. He sat me down at his kitchen table about 2 years before he got sick and walked me through it. He said he wanted me to know so there were no surprises, no fighting. He was practical like that. He hated conflict more than almost anything. I wish I had recorded that conversation. The morning after he passed, I drove my mother back to her house. I made her tea. I sat with her while she called her sisters. I didn't check my phone much. I was running on about 3 hours of sleep and the particular kind of numb that comes from crying so hard your body just gives up. It was my mother's neighbor, a retired woman named Carol who has lived 3 houses down for 22 years, who told me. She called my cell around 9 that evening, her voice careful in the way people's voices get when they're trying to deliver bad news without being the one responsible for it. "Honey," she said, "I don't want to upset you, but I saw Todd and Patrice over at the lake house today, with what looked like a locksmith." I asked her if she was sure. "I'm sure," she said. I was driving back from my sister's. I slowed down because I recognized Todd's truck. There was a man at the front door with a toolbox. I thanked her and sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Part of me didn't want to believe it. This was the day after my father died. We hadn't even begun to discuss arrangements. The funeral wasn't scheduled yet. My mother was 20 miles away, still in shock, still folding paper napkins. I called Todd. He didn't answer. I called Todd. He didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Did you change the locks at the lake house?" He replied 40 minutes later. 1 line. "Just making sure it's secure while everything gets sorted out." I read that text probably 6 times, "while everything gets sorted out." Like the lake house was some loose end. Like he'd taken it upon himself to manage a property that wasn't solely his to manage, before my father's body was even cold. I didn't respond. I needed to think. Here's the thing about grief, and I mean real grief, not the movie version. It doesn't leave you room for much else. Your brain is already running on fumes. You're making funeral decisions and calling relatives and figuring out what to do about your father's prescriptions and his mail and the fact that his car is still in the driveway. Adding your brother's behavior to that pile felt almost physically impossible. But something my father told me once came back to me that night. We were talking about a coworker of his who had gotten into a legal dispute with his siblings over an inheritance. My dad shook his head and said, "The time to call a lawyer is before you need one, not after." I'd filed that away as generic dad advice at the time. Standing in my mother's kitchen at 10:30 at night, I finally understood what he meant. I called an estate attorney the next morning. Her name was Patricia, a woman I found through a referral from my own boss who'd gone through something similar with his family 2 years earlier. I explained the situation. She told me to document everything, not to sign anything, not to agree to any verbal arrangements, and to get my hands on a copy of the will as soon as possible. She already had the general shape of the problem figured out by the end of our first call. "This is more common than you'd think," she told me, "especially in the immediate days after a death, before anyone's thinking clearly about legal rights. People move fast." I was starting to understand exactly how fast. The funeral was on a Saturday. It was a beautiful service, actually. More people came than any of us expected, including guys my dad had coached in Little League who were now in their 30s and showed up in ties, standing in the back of the room, looking uncomfortable and sincere. I held my mother's hand through most of it and didn't think about Todd once. But at the reception afterward, back at my parents' house, I noticed things. Patrice was moving through the rooms in a way that felt less like grief and more like inventory. I watched her pause at my father's desk. I watched her open a drawer, look at something, and close it again. I noticed she had spent a significant amount of time in my parents' bedroom, longer than anyone had any reason to be in there. I didn't say anything. I kept my face neutral and kept refilling people's coffee cups and made a mental note of all of it. Later that evening, after most people had gone, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard Todd and Patrice talking in the hallway. The kitchen door was slightly open. "I don't think they realized I was still there." "She's not going to push back," Patrice was saying, her voice low and certain. "She never does. She'll just go along with whatever we present her with, because she won't want conflict." Todd said something I couldn't fully make out. "The account. The house. If we move now, before any of the paperwork is filed, we have more leverage," she said. "Your mom won't fight us. She doesn't understand any of this. And your sister." She paused. "Your sister is grieving. She's not thinking straight." I stood at the sink with my hands still in the soapy water and felt something go very still inside me. She was right about one thing. I was grieving. She was wrong about everything else. I dried my hands. I went back to my guest room. I typed out a detailed account of everything I'd just heard, including the exact words I remembered, the time, who was present. I emailed it to myself with the subject line, "For the record." Then I texted Patricia, my attorney. "Even though it was a Saturday night, I think we need to meet first thing Monday." She replied within 20 minutes, "I'll have my assistant confirm the time. Don't discuss the estate with anyone in the family until we talk." Over the next 2 weeks, the full picture came into focus in pieces, each one worse than the last. Todd had, in fact, changed the locks on the lake house. When Patricia sent a formal letter citing the joint ownership laid out in the will, Todd's response, through his own attorney, was that he'd taken temporary stewardship of the property due to concerns about its condition. The property, which my family had maintained for 50 years, was in perfectly fine condition. This was a legal maneuver, nothing more. What we also discovered, and this part still makes my stomach turn, was that in the weeks before my father died, while he was on heavy medication and largely unable to manage his own affairs, Todd had been in contact with the financial institution holding my father's brokerage account. He had submitted paperwork attempting to add himself as a co-owner of the account. The institution had flagged it as irregular given my father's medical status, but the attempt had been made. Patricia explained it to me in her conference room, her voice completely even, the way lawyers talk when they want to convey seriousness without alarm. Your brother tried to position himself financially before your father passed, she said. The good news is it didn't work. The account is protected by the will, but the attempt is documented and we can use that. I remember sitting there looking at the framed print on her office wall, one of those aerial photographs of a city at night, all those little lights, and thinking about my father coaching Little League, about him crying at my school plays, about the way he used to say, "Don't fight, just be fair." He had tried so hard to make things simple. And Todd had spent the last months of our father's life trying to quietly dismantle everything he'd set up. I won't say I wasn't tempted to just blow everything up, to confront Todd at the dinner table at Christmas, to send a mass family email, to make it ugly and public the way part of me wanted to. But Patricia was clear. We would handle this through proper channels, document everything, let the legal process do the work. Anger is expensive, she told me once. Let me be precise instead. The estate process took 7 months. There were letters and counter-letters and one particularly tense mediation session where Todd and I sat across a table from each other in a downtown Cincinnati office building, both of us with our attorneys. My mother sitting quietly to the side, looking like she wished she were anywhere else on earth. Todd barely looked at me. Patrice had not been permitted to attend. In the end, the will held. Because my father had been thorough, because he'd updated the document with a reputable attorney, because he'd left nothing ambiguous, there wasn't much room for Todd to maneuver. The lock change was deemed unauthorized. Todd was required to return the original key and provide the new ones. The attempted account co-ownership was documented as an irregular act undertaken without my father's informed consent. It didn't change the distribution, but it was on record. The brokerage account was distributed per the will. The lake house remained jointly owned as my father intended, with sale requiring unanimous agreement. My mother kept the Cincinnati home. Todd got exactly what the will said he was entitled to. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. He and I haven't spoken since the mediation. I don't know if we ever will. There's a version of me, the one who grew up sharing the back seat on road trips, the one who danced with him at his wedding, that finds that genuinely sad. There's another version of me, the one who stood at a kitchen sink listening to his wife plan around my grief, that doesn't find it sad at all. My mother is doing okay. She sold my father's car in the spring and planted a garden where it used to sit. She has dinner with Carol, her neighbor, every other Tuesday. She called me last month just to talk, which she almost never used to do, and we stayed on the phone for almost 2 hours. Something has quietly shifted between us. Like we found each other again in the rubble of this year. The lake house is still in the family. Last August, I drove up to Michigan by myself, unlocked the door with the key I now legally possess, and sat on the back porch for about an hour watching the water. The dock needs some work. The kitchen faucet drips. There's a hook by the back door where my dad always hung his fishing hat, and the hat is still there. I didn't touch it. I've thought a lot about what my father would make of all of it. The lawyers, the letters, the mediation room. He hated conflict so much. He spent his whole life trying to prevent it. But I also think he'd understand. He was the one who sat me down at his kitchen table and told me exactly what he'd set up so there would be no surprises. He was the one who said, "Don't fight, just be fair." I didn't fight. I let the system he trusted do what it was designed to do. I just made sure it actually got to run. If you're going through something like this, if you're sitting in a grief you haven't finished feeling while someone around you is already moving fast and talking about leverage and stewardship, please listen to me. Write everything down. Email it to yourself. Call an attorney before you think you need one. Your grief is real and it deserves space. But don't let it be the thing that someone uses against you. My father built something over 30 years, and he left it to us carefully and clearly. The least I could do was make sure it ended up where he meant it to go. I think he knew I would. There's a fishing hat still hanging on a hook by the back door of our lake house in Michigan. My father put it there the last summer he was healthy enough to fish, and nobody has touched it since. Not me, not my brother, not anyone. I stood in front of it last August and just looked at it for a while. That's when I understood something I couldn't have put into words during the worst of it. The choices people make when something is ending reveal exactly who they are, not who they claim to be. Who they actually are. Todd made his choice fast. Within 48 hours of our father dying, he was already moving, changing locks, submitting paperwork, listening to his wife map out leverage while I stood at a kitchen sink in my father's house, still wearing the same clothes I'd worn to the funeral. I used to wonder how someone gets to that place. How you sit at your father's bedside for 14 months and come out the other side thinking about account co-ownership? I don't wonder anymore. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was a long erosion of small decisions, each one prioritizing what he could get over what was right. That's how character works, in my experience. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly in the choices nobody's watching you make, until one day something high stakes arrives and all those quiet choices show up at once. What I know now is that doing the right thing also accumulates. Every time I didn't send that furious text, every time I wrote things down instead of blowing up, every time I let Patricia handle the precision instead of letting my anger drive, those were deposits too. Integrity isn't one dramatic moment. It's the 100 small moments before it where you choose not to take the easy way, the dishonest way, the way that might get you more but cost you yourself. I also learned, the hard way, the real way, that being a good person is not the same as being passive. I think I used to confuse those two things. I thought not wanting conflict meant I had to absorb whatever came at me. My father didn't mean it that way when he said, "Don't fight, just be fair." Being fair required me to fight, actually, just through the right channels, with the right tools, with my head clear enough to use them. Clarity under pressure is its own form of courage. It doesn't look dramatic. It looks like emailing yourself a record of a hallway conversation at 10:30 at night. It looks like calling an attorney the morning after. And then there's the matter of endurance. Because 7 months of estate mediation while you're also grieving your father is not a small thing. There were weeks I was exhausted in a way that felt permanent. But I kept showing up. I kept answering Patricia's emails. I kept being present for my mother even when I had nothing left. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I had something specific to protect, what my father built, and what he meant when he built it. He wanted it to be fair. I made sure it was. The hat is still on the hook. The dock needs work. The kitchen faucet still drips. I'm going back up this summer, and I'm bringing a toolkit and a friend, and probably a bottle of wine, and we're going to sit on that porch and watch the water until it gets dark. My father would have liked that. He always said the point of having the place wasn't the place itself, it was having somewhere to go back to. I finally understand what he meant by that too.